For 3 weeks in a row, my brother-in-law visited my home every afternoon while I was at work. My wife never said a word about it. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I continue. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a structural engineer for a company based in Hamilton, Ontario. I built bridges. I calculated load capacities. I spent my career figuring out how much weight a structure could bear before it would collapse. And in all those years, I never once applied that same analytical approach to my own family. That was my first mistake, and it nearly cost me everything. My wife, Patricia, was 59 when this story started. We had been married for 34 years. She was a retired school teacher, a gardener, a woman who saved every birthday card our children ever gave her in a shoebox under the bed. She was not a dramatic woman. She did not exaggerate. When she told me in late September that she had been feeling dizzy, that her appetite had decreased, that she was waking up at 2 in the morning with her heart racing, I told her it was probably just stress. I told her to schedule a doctor's appointment when she had time. I kissed her forehead and went to work. That is the kind of husband I was. Patricia had one sibling. Her brother, Clifford Marsh, was 54 years old, 9 years younger than her. He had never kept a job for longer than 2 years in his life. He was charming in the way that people who have never been held accountable for anything are charming. Easy smile, loud laugh, always the first to offer help he would never actually deliver. Our family had a cottage on Georgian Bay that Patricia had inherited from our in-laws 11 years earlier. It was worth at that point somewhere close to $800,000. Clifford had been making comments about that cottage since the day it became Patricia's. Small remarks, jokes that weren't quite jokes. "Lucky you got the good one, Patty," things like that. I noticed. I remembered them. And then I did nothing with it because I was busy building bridges and not paying enough attention to my own home. Patricia's health declined gradually through October. She was nauseated most mornings. She lost about 6 lbs in 5 weeks, which she initially blamed on her lack of appetite. She was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. I took her to our family doctor, Dr. Hemming, who ran blood tests and said her iron was slightly low and recommended she take a supplement. Patricia started taking the supplements. She did not improve. It was our daughter, Renee, who first mentioned something to me. Renee was 31, lived in G, and called her mother every Sunday without fail. She phoned me on a Tuesday in early November, which was unusual enough that I stepped away from a site meeting to take the call. "Dad," she said, "Mom sounds off." I asked her what she meant. "She sounds hazy, like she's not following the conversation properly." I asked her what she had for lunch, and she couldn't remember. That's not Mom. I told Renee I would pay closer attention. I returned to my meeting. What I did not know at that moment, what I would not know for another 3 weeks, was that Clifford had been inside my house 11 times in the previous month. I found that out later. I'm getting ahead of myself. Clifford had been coming by under the pretense of helping Patricia with minor chores around the house. This is the part that shames me most, because I had asked him to. Patricia had mentioned in early October that the eaves needed cleaning before the first snow, and I had been too busy to handle it. So, when Clifford offered, and Clifford always offered, I said, "Yes, that would be great. Thank you." That was the door I opened. After the eaves, he returned to check on a window seal. After the window seal, he started coming to check on Patricia, because by then, she was not well enough to question it. My wife trusted her brother. She had loved him her entire life, the way older siblings love the ones who came after them, protectively, a little indulgently, always ready to make excuses. I came home early on a Wednesday in mid-November. I had a headache that had been building since noon, and I decided the afternoon's paperwork could wait. I pulled into the driveway at 3:15 and Clifford's truck was parked on the street. I felt something shift in my chest when I saw it. Not alarm exactly, more like the feeling you get when you're reviewing structural calculations and something doesn't add up, but you can't immediately identify what. I went inside. Clifford was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Patricia was sitting across from him, looking pale, wrapped in a cardigan, even though the house was warm. They were having a perfectly ordinary conversation about nothing. Clifford smiled when he saw me. He was always ready with a smile. "Gerald, didn't expect you home early." I said something about my headache. I watched him. He was relaxed. Too relaxed, maybe, but I was not sure if I was imagining that. We talked for 20 minutes, and then he said he had to get going. He hugged Patricia on his way out. I watched her face when he hugged her. She looked tired and fond. The way you look at someone you have always looked after. That night, I asked Patricia how often Clifford had been coming by. She thought about it for a few moments. She said he's been very helpful. Like, how often? Once a week. She looked vaguely uncertain. More than that, I think. I'm not sure. He's good company. That uncertainty in her voice. That was the thing that stayed with me. I am an engineer. I don't make decisions based on feelings. I make them based on data. So, I did something that I have since asked myself 100 times whether I should have done sooner. I ordered a small indoor camera, the kind that looks like a smoke detector. I installed it in the living room on a Friday evening while Patricia was napping. It connected to an app on my phone. I told myself it was because I wanted to understand what was happening with her health, whether she was falling, whether she was confused when I wasn't there. I told myself it had nothing to do with Clifford. I was not being fully honest with myself. The first week showed me nothing alarming. Clifford came twice. He made tea, he sat with Patricia, he helped her with a crossword puzzle. On the second visit, he stayed for nearly 2 hours, and I watched him on my phone from a parking lot in Burlington during a site visit and felt vaguely foolish. And then I saw it. It was a Thursday. I was at the office. The app sent me a motion notification just after 2:00 in the afternoon. I opened it, expecting to see Clifford arriving, which had become routine enough that I'd almost stopped reacting. What I saw instead took me a full 10 seconds to process. Clifford was in the kitchen, which was partially visible from the living room camera. Patricia was not in frame. He had opened the cabinet where we kept medications and supplements. He stood there for a moment, looked toward the hallway, and then took something from his jacket pocket. He held it over Patricia's iron supplement bottle, and he tipped something into it. I watched it 3 times. My hands were shaking by the second replay. I want to tell you that I picked up the phone and called the police immediately. That is what any rational person would say they would do. But I sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes unable to move because what I had just watched was my wife's brother, a man I had known for 34 years, a man who had been the best man at our wedding poisoning my wife's medication. And my brain was not ready to hold that truth yet. It kept trying to rewrite it into something else. Maybe it was something harmless. Maybe it was a vitamin. Maybe I was wrong about what I had seen. I was not wrong. I called Patricia instead. I told her to not take any supplements until I got home. I made up a reason. Something about wanting to check the dosage with her doctor first. She said, okay, in that foggy, agreeable way she'd had for weeks. And I hung up and sat there for another 3 minutes just breathing. Then I called my daughter Renee. I told her what I had seen. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Dad," she said finally, "you need to call the police right now. I want to get the bottle first. I want proof. The video is proof. I'm going home to get the bottle." "Then I'm calling." I drove home in 38 minutes, which should have taken 50. I went straight to the medication cabinet. I took the supplement bottle and put it in a Ziploc bag without opening it. I found Patricia in the den, dozing in the armchair, and I sat beside her and I held her hand and I told her that I loved her and that I was sorry I hadn't been paying attention. She opened her eyes and looked at me with that foggy expression and said, "What are you sorry for, Gerald?" I didn't know how to answer that yet. I called the non-emergency RCMP line first, described what I had seen, and was transferred twice before reaching a constable who took the camera footage seriously. Within 40 minutes, there was a constable at my door. I showed her the video. She bagged the supplement bottle. She told me not to contact Clifford and not to discuss what I had found with anyone outside my immediate family until they had done preliminary testing. Patricia was taken to Hamilton General that evening. She resisted at first. She said she was fine. She said I was overreacting. It took me and Renee together to convince her. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. What they found in the supplement bottle was a compound that I will let the toxicologist's report describe in clinical terms because I still cannot say the name of it without my throat closing. What I will tell you is that it was not something you find by accident. It was something you obtained deliberately. It had been introduced to the supplement bottle in a quantity that, taken daily as directed, would have caused progressive neurological damage. Over months, slowly enough to look like illness, slowly enough to look like decline. Patricia had been taking those supplements for 5 weeks. The police brought Clifford in for questioning that same night. I was not present for it. Renee and I sat in the hospital waiting room and did not speak much. There was nothing to say that the silence wasn't already saying. What the investigation uncovered over the following weeks was this. Clifford was in debt. Serious, structured debt. Not the ordinary kind that comes from bad luck, but the kind that comes from bad choices made consistently over many years. He owed money to people who were not patient creditors. He had been researching the legal process for contesting inheritance and property transfers. He had spoken twice to a lawyer in Barrie about the process by which a property could be transferred from someone who was mentally incapacitated to a designated family member acting as power of attorney. He had not actually obtained power of attorney, but he had been preparing to. The cottage was worth $840,000 by the November appraisal. He had been making his sister sick slowly enough that no one would ask the right questions until she was compromised enough to be managed. That was the plan. And it would have worked except that I installed a camera and I watched it on my phone in a parking lot in Burlington on a Thursday afternoon when I should have been reviewing concrete specifications. I have spent a great deal of time since then thinking about the 9 weeks between when Patricia first told me she felt unwell and when I saw that footage. 9 weeks, I was in the same house. I ate dinner across from my wife every evening. She was well enough to sit at the table. I noticed she was losing weight, and I told myself it was the iron supplement working. I noticed she seemed confused, and I told myself it was fatigue. I am an engineer. I know how to read warning signs in structures. I did not apply that same discipline to the person I had promised to spend my life protecting. That is the hardest thing to carry. Patricia spent 4 days in hospital. The damage from 5 weeks of exposure was real, but not permanent. The doctors told us she would need monitoring for several months. Her balance would be affected for a time. Some of the fogginess would clear as the compound left her system, which it mostly did by February. She has never once, in all the time since, expressed anger at her brother directly to me. I asked her once about 6 months after everything whether she was angry. She was quiet for a while. We were sitting on the back porch. It was early spring, and the yard was just starting to come back. I keep trying to understand when he decided to, she said. Was it recent, or did he always see me as something he could use? I didn't have an answer for that. Clifford was charged with administering a noxious substance with intent to harm. He was also charged with criminal harassment and fraud-related preparation. He pleaded not guilty and then 14 months later changed his plea. He was sentenced in the spring of the following year. I will not tell you the sentence was satisfying. Justice in a courtroom is not the same as repair. Patricia and I still have the cottage. We went up there the July after sentencing, just the two of us, and we sat on the dock in the evenings and watched the light go out of the sky over Georgian Bay, and she put her head on my shoulder, and neither of us talked about Clifford at all. There is something I want to say to the people watching this who are like I was, good at paying attention to the wrong things. I was proud of my professional diligence. I was meticulous about my work. I reviewed every calculation twice. I did not miss details that mattered in a professional context, but I had built a habit over 30 years of leaving my observational discipline at the office door. Family was the place where I let my guard down, and I had confused letting my guard down with being loving. I thought that being a trusting husband meant not asking questions. I thought that being a relaxed family member meant taking people at face value. Trust is not the same as inattention. Love is not the same as looking away. I had to learn that at 63 in a hospital waiting room holding a Ziploc bag with my wife's supplement bottle in it. If someone in your family is not well and the explanation doesn't fully satisfy you, push harder. Ask more. Book the second doctor. Install the camera. Make the phone call that feels excessive. The cost of being wrong about your suspicion is embarrassment. The cost of being right about it and saying nothing is something you do not want to calculate. Patricia is well now. She is back in her garden. She is back on the phone with Renee every Sunday. She is in most ways the woman I married, though there is something careful in her now that was not there before, a slight hesitation before she trusts, a moment of assessment before she opens the door. I would give a great deal to give her back the version of herself that didn't need that, but I cannot. What I can do is be the person who should have been paying attention from the beginning. That is what I am trying to be now. It is late enough in a man's life that you would think the lessons would stop arriving. They do not. The structures we trust most, the ones made of family and history and shared decades, are the ones we inspect least carefully. And sometimes that is exactly what someone is counting on. Pay attention to your house, not just the walls, not just the roof, the people inside it. That is where the weight matters most. Thanks for watching.